Hey everyone, my name is Ronnye Corona. Thank you for joining me today on this podcast about my book called Restored. Today the conversation is going to be with my husband. We're going to be talking a little bit more about our journey and what God did through that journey in our lives, how He showed us to lean more into Him, how He is the only one that can truly provide the comfort and everything that we need when we're going through a crisis like that. So let's go ahead and get started, and I pray that this will bless you. Hey guys, so today I invited my husband into the conversation. I wanted to have him here so we can talk a little bit about how this process was for us as a marriage, how it was for him as my husband, how it was for us as a family. You know, we have 3 children, and just talk a little bit about the things that perhaps I didn't put in the book or expand on some of the things that I did put on the book. So today we wanted to start the conversation and talk a little bit about how the process was in receiving the news, how we each received it, and talk a little bit about how it was for us to have to tell our children. We have 3 children. At the time, the 2 younger ones were pretty young. They were, 8, 10, and Nolani was early 20s.
Yeah, 21.
19.
20, something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so they were pretty young, the little ones. There's also the pandemic, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So it came with a lot,
Yep.
And it was quite challenging. For me personally, receiving the news was really shocking. I had been very healthy my whole life. My family, I come from a family that's pretty healthy, and it was the least thing that I expected to happen. Even up until the biopsy, I was completely convinced that it was going to be a false alarm. I had many friends that had gone all the way to a biopsy, and they all received a benign result, that it was a false alarm. And I was completely convinced that that was going to be my case,
Right.
up until the biopsy,
Right.
which we talked about earlier, that's a memory that kind of stays in our mind, because as I walked out the hospital, I'll tell my side, you could tell your side on that. As I walked out the hospital, it really shook me at that moment when I saw the doctor was concerned when he did the biopsy. And I said, okay, wait a minute. There might be something here. Something may be wrong. And when you went to pick me up, I was kind of overwhelmed at that moment.
Yeah, I remember that day pretty vividly. It's one of those things that you don't know what to expect. Okay, I was going to believe just as much as you were going to believe, right? That there was nothing wrong with you. And unfortunately, I have maybe one case of cancer in my family, which was my dad. But not growing up with him, I wasn't too close to the situation. So I've never seen that either. And so I had no idea what was coming our way. It was one of those things that we weren't sure how we were going to handle it. I know that one of the things that we talked about was trying to hold that information in and get more information before we start communicating things. Our children being young, the 2 younger ones, were going to be very difficult to get them to understand what was going to happen or what was happening. But at the same time, we just felt like we didn't know what to say, right? I kind of felt like I had no idea what was going to happen. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain anything. I kind of felt like I needed more information. And obviously, it happening to you, not happening to me, feeling like I needed to find a way to get more information to be there for you, right? And it was just a very nerve-wracking time. It was very scary. I remember the conversation all the way home. It was a long drive. It felt long.
And it's a 2-minute drive from our house.
It was a long drive.
But it felt like an eternity.
Felt like forever.
Yeah. It was probably the time that I was most nervous about the future
Right.
in my life. And then the night that we actually received the news, I remember it was a Wednesday night when the doctor called me, and I was home alone. You hadn't gotten home yet. And I couldn't, I just couldn't believe it. Even though I got a little bit worried after the biopsy, I still thought, well, maybe it's still nothing,
Right.
Let me just stay hopeful that it's still nothing. But when I got the news, it was complete shock. I just did not expect it. I just thought sickness was not for me. Me sick? No,
Right.
no, not me.
Yeah.
You know.
I remember a lot of those, obviously waiting for those results. It was a lot of prayer. asking God, hey, Lord, please help us out with this. It can't be true. It can't be. She's so healthy. She's doing so well. We don't know how to deal with this. So we know it's not going to happen. It's not true. We wanted to believe. We wanted to have so much faith that it wouldn't happen. But it was just one of those things that, again, it was that fear, or just the fear of the unknown. I'm very big on that. The reality is that there's always a fear in just not knowing, right? And so there's a lot of that insecurity there, and me trying to provide for my family, take care of my wife, be the provider, the protector, right? The one that has all the solutions. I had no idea what to do.
Yeah, because you feel at that moment with something like this, it's like you feel it's completely out of your hands.
Right.
Which is where faith should be coming in, right? And we forget for a moment sometimes that's when that faith needs to be practiced and needs to be exercised, right?
Right.
But we let fear take over for a moment because it's completely out of our hands. And then we had the process of us dealing with it, right? We had to process this information, process this news that we were completely unexpected. I mean, you have to understand, you're fine one day, we're perfectly healthy, our life is perfectly fine one day, and then within a week's time, have our life go upside down to get the news that you have a sickness that you're going to receive, one of the harshest treatments that you could receive.
Right.
You're perfectly fine one day, and then the next day they're telling you this. So it was a lot to process. It was a lot to take in. But then we had to also deal with our family, first our children. And I know at that time, immediately that evening, we didn't talk a lot because we were just, I think, in shock, processing, just trying in our own minds to figure this out. And we decided that we weren't going to tell the children yet, which I think was a good choice because we needed to get all the information, understand what was going to happen, what were the next steps, how bad is it? Because you don't know with cancer. It could be, just one little spot or it could be more. So we needed to gather all that information before we told the children. And again, I remember that night we didn't talk much. We got a phone call from a couple friends. I don't remember anything about the phone calls except that they happened. Sorry if you're listening. It's a complete blank for me. And then, we had to take things on the next day and start calling doctor's appointments. You just have to keep moving along with it while you're at the same time trying to process it. But then you got to get more information and go to the next step and go to the next step. Yeah. So the 2 weeks after that, before we told the children, was just like one thing after another.
I've always been the kind of father that's trying to be as honest as I can with my kids. I try to be realistic about life with them. Life is not always easy. And the reality is that by sometimes protecting your children from some of the hardships of life can sometimes be not the best option, because then all of a sudden they grow up in a world in their own mind that is not necessarily what it is, right? So I sometimes worry about that kind of stuff. But at that night, and when we talked about that, and we said, look, we should not say anything, it was the right thing to do.
So this was challenging, of course, in itself to get the news that you have cancer. That's enough news to be a challenge for our lives. But we want to add to that this was a week before the pandemic shutdown. So now just a week after I get this news, we were already kind of hearing a little bit about COVID, but just it took a few days for it to get as serious as it was, at least in our city. And we had to add that now to the plate. So now we're dealing with this disease, with this treatment I have to get that it's completely unfamiliar to us. We're dealing with all the fear from this virus that we know nothing about. We have no idea what's going to happen with our family, the economy, toilet paper.
The toilet paper shortage.
All these things going on. And that in itself was a big layer of the challenge that we had. For us, for our family, dealing with the children, because now I had to homeschool. While I'm trying to get ready, while I'm trying to do all these tests and get ready to start chemo in just a few weeks, I had to now start homeschooling my children because, they're on the laptop on Zoom with the teacher, but my little guy was in 3rd, 4th grade, and I had to kind of watch over him, and I had to help him learn the material because they weren't grasping everything. I had to help him with his assignments. So there was a lot added. Yes, the advantage was we were all home, right? But I was still working. You were still working. Again, we're having to deal with all these appointments and this treatment that was about to start. So that was pretty crazy, pretty challenging.
Yeah, it's almost like one of the things that I felt like we almost had to become teachers. We had to become tutors.
Yeah.
We had to become, obviously, Ronnie being so little, much more visual, right? He wanted to see visual stuff. And so it was easy to go to school and you see the teacher and, right there and then I can ask questions. But on Zoom, it felt like they weren't getting the attention they needed. It felt like overwhelming for teachers, I would assume, with all these, 30 kids on a screen and you have no idea what they're doing and what they're, so the reality was difficult for both of them to kind of deal with that. And then we had to kind of help them out on a regular basis. So you going through what you're going through, me trying to help you and be there for you. On top of that, and then also trying to get them to get their schoolwork done, and they don't understand something. Now remember, we grew up in '90s, right? '90s and early 2000s, and so the reality is we don't even understand what they're even learning in school nowadays, right?
Yeah,
so
that was the other challenge.
I don't even understand half the stuff they're learning. I mean, who gets the math nowadays?
Yeah,
I don't get it.
Yeah.
So it was challenging. Well, I mean, I'm literally Googling how to do a math equation nowadays because if they do it the way I did it, then they would get it wrong.
Yeah. Props to those homeschool moms.
Oh my God, for real. I don't know how you do it.
Yeah, I don't know how they do it. But yes, I was definitely, and the kids were missing their friends, their activities. Yep. The first couple weeks was like, oh yay, we don't have to go to school, we're on vacation. But after that, right. They were pretty much done with it and wanted to get back to their routines, and we just couldn't do that.
Right.
And aside from that, it was so far from our reality with having to see mommy now. Once I started chemo, that's it.
Yep.
It
became real.
It became real. My energy was shut down. I'm going through all these side effects and all these things going on in my body that they weren't used to seeing their mom like that. Mommy was the one there, doing all these things for them. And now I had to kind of take a step back and they had to kind of take a step up. Right. And kind of being more independent and doing their things. And daddy had to be the one stepping in a little bit more to help out with the meals and the things that they needed. And sometimes it would be frustrating because I would be like, you would tell me, babe, just rest. I'm like, no, I want to cook for my kids. I want to prepare something for my kids. I want to be there for my babies, and that in itself was also a challenge.
I remember one day specifically having to... our lead pastor came up and saw me and one day at work, and he came up and he said, "Hey Ronnie, how are you feeling, man? How's everything going?" And I remember I just broke down. I just couldn't take it anymore. And when I broke down, he gave me some amazing words of advice. And it doesn't sound amazing, and I will go more into this on another episode we're going to do. But the challenge was, if you're upset with God, take it up with Him. Go to Him. And I remember him telling me that, and that resonated so much with me because I was a little upset. I was upset with what was going on. I kind of felt like the Lord maybe wasn't there for me, and I thought wasn't there for you, and was kind of upset with Him. But I remember him telling me that, and I was like, you know what? You're right. And I almost became like a challenge to now come and confront God. And but that was the greatest advice I could get, because every time I did come to a moment of confrontation with the Lord, He would always show me so much love and grace. And He always told me, hey, you might not understand, but I love her. She's my child. She's my daughter. And I love you. So the reality is as much as I wanted to fight, He wasn't going to fight me back. He was just going to show me that at the end of the day, He's still in control. And that His love still conquers over all. And so a lot of challenges, but I'm going to tell you the truth. If I didn't have the staff on my side and have work at the level that I had, I don't know if I would have made it through as well as I did, I believe.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, because I think having a little bit of work, I know some people didn't have any. Mm-hmm. I think for us, it was a blessing because it gave us a little outlet to kind of get away from the cancer thing, from everything that was going on with us. It gave us that time to kind of disconnect from it a little bit. Yeah. So in itself, I think it was definitely a blessing. And those words from Roby not only worked in you, but you brought that to me at one point. I think it was a little bit, months later probably. But but it helped me as well. It challenged me as well to come before the Lord. And I write about that in the book.